This is a special episode. In January, I had the honor of visiting the campus and being the keynote speaker at Champlain College's annual retreat. It brought together faculty, staff, and administration to learn and apply the Connected College playbook. We captured the great conversation I had with their amazing Provost Monique Taylor about topics like managing risk, making decisions, communicating effectively, and more. We talk about what it means to be a connected college or university. We spotlight the exciting things already happening at Champlain and across the country, and offer advice on moving from ideas through implementation. I hope you'll enjoy it. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Connected College Podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Felix. I've helped more than 100 colleges and universities change what they offer, how they operate, and the way they're organized to enable student success. Join me for insightful interviews with higher ed innovators sharing the stories, stats, and strategies to create better connected colleges and universities.
Today, my friend walking to the stage right here, Elliot Felix. No, he said no walk-on music. Yeah, I like that. So Elliot brings a unique perspective to higher education. He's not just an expert, he's a designer that reimagines the entire college experience. For 2 decades, Elliot has partnered with over 100 institutions, from Carnegie Mellon to MIT. I'm from Pittsburgh, so Carnegie Mellon. From NYU to NC State, applying design thinking to revolutionize the spaces where students learn, the services that support them, and the technology that connects them. His work has directly enhanced the educational journey of more than 1 million students nationwide. Let me say that again, 1 million. All right. His latest book, which you all should have on your table right now, The Connected College, Leadership Strategies for Student Success, was recently recognized as one of the top 10 best books in higher education for 2025. Let's give him a round for that. That's beautiful. As we chart Champlain's path forward, building on our strengths in experiential learning, innovation, and student-centered education, Elliot's perspective could be more timely. His work affirms the bold direction we're taking while opening our eyes to greater possibilities. So today's conversation with Provost Taylor will explore how Champlain can continue leading the way in creating the connected, transformative experience our students deserve. So without further ado, I give you Provost Taylor and Elliot Felix.
Thanks very much.
Elliot, it is really great to welcome you to campus. It's good to see you again, and I really enjoyed talking with you earlier in the week. And I'm very excited that our community has the chance to spend some time with you this morning and then smaller groups throughout the day. Some of us have read Connected College or started reading Connected College. Thank you to Jen Nichols, who's made sure that we have lots of copies available. Bethany Dietrich tells me that the library has already put in the order, so the book will be available for circulation through the campus. We're in this work with you. I would say even for those who have yet to read the book, I want to call out 2 things. One, Champlain makes an appearance on page 145, so yay for us for being in the kind of work that you recognize as innovative and pushing higher ed forward. And then the other thing about the book is that the chapters are presented to us and they range from facilities to finance, technology to teaching, data to board work and governance, career enrollment, all the pockets and spaces of our campus. There is truly a place for everyone in this conversation about connected college, and I really love and appreciate that. I want to start by posing a big question for my colleagues here today and our colleagues who are with us online. As you listen, really be thinking, what does it look like for an institution to be truly connected? What does it look like for an institution to be truly connected? Our speaker is here. Our speaker will go. Those of us who are teachers know that the best job that we can do in helping you as learners is to hand you those big questions so that you carry them forward beyond the moment. And I would say that if you keep that question in front of you through the semester that's in front of us, what does it look like for an institution to be truly connected? You have something really to hold in your hand, to focus your eyes at as we walk through work that is transformational, that is transitional. And we all know it can be exciting, it can be rewarding, and it can be really heavy and really difficult. And we all know we've had struggles and challenges and moments where we wake up and walk every day through the good and the bad. But keep that question in your hands, in your heart, in your thinking. What does it look like for a college to be truly connected? Because that is a path that we have committed ourselves to. Elliot Felix, kick us off here. Why this book? What inspired you to write? And just share with us some of how you got the words in the pages here.
First of all, I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to hear what you all have to say and think about the book. And I hope it's helpful to help you create a more connected college at Champlain. And really the impetus for the book was finding ways to be helpful. I've been lucky enough to work with more than 100 colleges and universities and help them rethink what they offer, how they're organized, how they operate. But that's only so many folks. And as I go around to different colleges and universities, I see so many smart, well-meaning, hardworking people trying to help students succeed, like all of you. But sometimes the structure, the technology systems, maybe the lack of strategy get in the way. And I really wanted to create an encouraging, evidence-based playbook to help folks work even better together, to help students succeed, to do the kinds of things that you all are so focused on, like experiential learning, which you can't do very well without that kind of collaboration, right? You have to work across different disciplines. You have to connect with companies. The career has to be connected to the coursework and so forth. You have to have those feedback loops. And so that was really my goal, to be as helpful as I can in helping all of you help students succeed.
I like that idea of the evidence-based playbook. Can you say a little bit about the way that you set up these chapters? You invite us right from the start to jump in and jump around and mix it up. Why is that the approach?
There's 678 references in the book. Let's go through them one at a time. There's a lot of evidence and examples in the book because I feel like what people need now, I think it's been a hard year. It's been a hard 5 years, been a hard 25 years. And I really wanted to set the book up to provide that encouragement, to provide those examples, to say, hey, we've got this, we can do this. And as you said, for people to see themselves in the book. If you imagine the org chart of Champlain College, each box kind of has its chapter, right? There's administration, there's assessment, there's academic programs, academic support, athletics, advancement. And then there's even some things that don't start with A: careers, IT, facilities, enrollment management. And I imagine this very much as a choose your own adventure. For instance, you might want to start with your function, the thing you're most familiar with, to feel grounded. Or you might want to start with the thing you're least familiar with, right? And I want to learn more about so that I can collaborate better. And so each chapter starts with a profile of an innovator or innovators, and then has 3 big ideas, and then has a bunch of tactics about how you can work across the different functions. And my background is actually in design. So I was very much thinking about how design solves problems for people and organizing the book with different personas in mind, designing the book with that in mind. So there might be the accomplished leader that knows about everything but enrollment management, or there might be the emerging leader that kind of grew up in a discipline and now needs to look out and across and look at these different chapters. Far be it from me to dictate how you should read a book. I wanted to give people permission to use it in the way that was most helpful for them.
so very postmodern or, Tarantino to splice the story in that way. But I think what you also give us the ability to sit comfortably with is that we've been trained and we bring experiences in the areas of the college that make up the whole, the parts that make up the whole. And sometimes we need our people and a retreat to that space to really think about who we are and what we're doing in academics, enrollment, facilities. And at the same time, I think one of values exercises is asking people to really think about those departments, those colleagues, those places where you've had the opportunity, or you might be that person who's really helping pull others along into your work. So I like that mix and match because for me, when I first opened the book, and I read it a few times because I had to be studied to be ready to talk with you, but my impulse was, I'm going to read academic affairs and then student affairs, and I'm going to go in order because old-fashioned reader. And then I realized, no, I want to actually go right into something that I really don't feel comfortable that I know enough about. And I started at the end and zigzagged my way back. And it was then giving me the opportunity, even if you don't read the book, think about the relationships that you're having as you bounce around the college. You start at home, you move somewhere else. You've moved to that place, you move back to some other place. Really the opportunity to just think about what we're picking up and learning about building a college of the future when we take the time to expand our boundaries. So I love the setup. You remind me that in the design thinking background that you have, I think this is something that will resonate with a lot of people in our community. Why is design think so important, and the designer in you such an important voice and perspective that you're bringing to the college work?
A lot of people talk about how it's the classroom experience, it's the out of classroom experience, and it's how you put them together. And I think you all are doubling down on that in really exciting ways. For me, I had so many amazing classroom experiences in my own education. I started off in architecture, and I still remember to this day, probably the best class I had was an English class. And we walked in, and with almost no context or instruction, it was an English class on collage, and it was about collage as a literary and cultural medium. And the instructor, Professor Lin, this is maybe 30 years ago, he said, come in, take out a sheet of paper, and on one side, write a story that reads like a landscape, then turn it over, and then write a landscape that reads like a story. And then he left the room. And he said, I'll be back in half an hour. And we all looked at each other, and it was that kind of stretch assignment that I think is so formative. So I had amazing classroom experiences, but also I was always involved in student government. And when I was at MIT, it was an amazing place, still is, but was in a time of transition. And so the student government got together and we did a survey of all the students. We did town hall meetings. We actually did benchmarking, comparing ourselves to other departments. And then we went to the student body and said, this is what we're hearing. These are maybe what the issues are. And let's brainstorm solutions. And then we went to the dean, who was brand new, and she was just absolutely delighted that we weren't just coming to complain, but we are actually coming with solutions. And she said, these all sound great. So we really elevated the thesis as a capstone project, and we changed the schedule around so people could cross enroll. And we actually doubled the pay of TAs because it had fallen way behind departments. And that was design thinking in action, because we were focusing on and trying to understand people and their needs. We were making connections. We were defining the problem before jumping in to solve it. We were creating the solutions together. And what's interesting is the consulting work that I do every day is pretty darn similar to what I got started doing as a student. And I think that design thinking mindset, tool set, skill set is so valuable at a time like this, when there is a lot of change, when there is a lot of uncertainty, when there is the need to work together to define a problem, to come up with solutions, and then actually to put them into practice.
So part of the advice then to our community is to think in design as a way of bringing forward solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think within the book, I talk about 4 big aspects of design, and it is understanding and focusing on people. It is making those connections, thinking synthetically, right, to connect, to understand how you might co-teach a course or how you might collaborate with a company, and then to create those solutions together and to try things out, to prototype things, right? I know you have a lot of sophisticated gaming and cyber here, so to put it in some of those terms, to go from waterfall to agile, right? And to say, let's do small tests, let's get feedback, then let's scale up our success. So I think prototyping and piloting is a huge part of it. So those are the 4 tenets, let's say, of design thinking or human-centered design. And I don't think you have to be a designer to put them into practice. I think it's a mindset and it's a way of solving problems for people, I think, which is ultimately why we're all here, right? We want to create remarkable, transformative learning experiences and change lives.
Thanks for that. I think, again, this is something that resonates for many in our community who bring that mindset, the solving problems for people approach. And I actually went back last night to the point where Champlain sits in your book. And I want to read it, but I also want to flip it a little bit because you talk about us as a college, a community of higher ed practitioners, designing institution, designing for students. And the more I read all of these books, I think that we forget to pay attention to designing for us, designing for ourselves.
Yeah, you all are people too.
Yeah. And we are such a loving, caring community. We do think about student belonging and inclusion, but a lot of the focus is on students, the enrollment, bringing them here, the retention, the belonging. And it's the colleagues that I want us to think about. And so I want to actually look at where you call us out with being an inspiring example of the mental health and wellness challenges that surface after pandemic. Champlain College is an example of a school that implemented a first-year course centered on health, wellness, and academic preparedness to address rising concerns regarding mental health among college students. I want us to think about ourselves as colleagues in that, in what are the things that we're also implementing along the way to think about our own health and wellness, that we design strong systems to support students, but have we made that space for thinking about ourselves? This is a reference to what we call Champ 101 at the college. The course integrates mental health literacy, self-care strategies, and academic success skills into a cohesive curriculum. You've called out, we're all very much aware, these are really challenging times in the world, America, and higher ed, but that practice of managing stress, fostering healthy relationships, I think also sits in part of this design work. We don't want to design too much. We can't be too busy. We don't want to get beyond the capacity of what we can do in service of students if it's taking us out as humans and as colleagues. And then you point to some of the great statistics that we've seen from the success of that program. And I go into that as a way to flip it out back for the community because I think it shows we know we can. We know that we can put this kind of attention to the level of care that this really stressful moment in the century calls on, but it has to be about us as a college community too, because we're also serving populations that have incredible challenges and high needs. So I like that design think. I like that I do see it coming into our academic design, the college design work, but I also want us to think about problem, solution, problem for us as a community, for the colleagues.
I think that's a great prompt. And in the administration chapter, one of the key points I took away from Sanjit Sethi, who was the president of MCAD, where I also served on the board, he talks about student success is only possible with community success, with faculty success, staff success, board success, and they're all related. So I appreciate you calling that out. And can I ask you a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
As you're thinking about the future, as you zigzag through the book, like, what are you most excited about?
Oh my gosh,
or what are some of the things?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, again, it is no secret that this is just a really challenging time in the world, and especially for higher ed. We have lived through the pandemic. I arrived at the college talking about the transition through the pandemic as a portal, and I think we're still in this kind of post-pandemic age. And in terms of the students who come to us, we know that they're carrying from earlier years skills, academic skills, and social skills delay and disruption. The mental health challenges are there. We know that people question the value of a degree, that the AI challenges are putting us in the moment of huge seismic technological change. It's really tough. And I spent close to 2 decades of my career before I came to Champlain working in some pretty challenging environments overseas, designing higher ed for the future, but designing in environments designed or shaped by military occupation and war, drug war, conflict and violence, Chinese authoritarianism, and I don't back off and back down and don't give up. What makes me excited is that the need, the reason, the meaning of education as access to opportunity, as the impact that we make on economies that are local, regional, national, and global, the way that education is designed to shape citizenship, leadership, to help people live better, happier, longer lives, I think is really important. And in the face of all of this challenge, what really excites me most is having found a home in a community with colleagues in a college where, again, if you look at the values that define Champlain, we're not done. We're not backing off. We're not backing down. And we have our eyes on the future because I think maybe many of you are like me. You work in higher ed, you work with students, you work in an environment shaped by teaching and learning because it's a passion and a calling, and the work has purpose and meaning. And the fact that, to the earlier points I made, the design that we're doing is fabulously inspiring. That's what excites me. But it is really challenging. And I think the excitement has to come from people just really digging in to channel together why it's so important what we do.
It's exciting stuff. I think you can work for a company, you can work for a cause, you can work for a calling, and each one, maybe each step along the way has a greater impact and a greater responsibility. And I think it is a challenging time, but I think the impact you can have is pretty extraordinary.
We just heard 2 of our students talk about the values we've transmitted, the soft skills preparation, the opportunities that we've created. And just in those short 20-minute moments, there's where the inspiration sits.
Yes.
That's what motivates me. That's what I think is really exciting.
I'm still learning about all the great things you all are doing, but it strikes me that there are a lot of great things. And whether it's the flexible curriculum, the career focus, the connection to industry, the collaborative studios, those all, I think, are very exciting ways to create the kind of impact you're talking about on student success and in the communities you're a part of. I'm pulling for you. I'm excited to see how these things turn out.
So give us a little more wisdom and inspiration. You talk about risk, that we have to get beyond through risk in order to realize innovation. And I want you to just sit with the risk bit for a moment.
I was joking earlier that this feels like a TED Talk,
Or Paula Abdul,
which is great. But one of my favorite parodies of a TED Talk was done by The Onion. And this guy gets up there and he talks about how his world-changing idea is a car that runs on compost. And he makes lots of big gestures and lots of pensive moments and poses. And he says, step one, come up with the idea to create a car that runs on compost. Step two, make the car. And then he says, we're already halfway there. And I think we have a lot of good ideas, and now we need to couple them with good execution and good implementation. And the relationship to risk does sometimes get in the way. One thing I find if I'm doing a workshop on a new space or new service or new system, new staffing model, I'll be really direct with folks about, hey, remember, the goal isn't perfect. We're not trying to come up with a perfect solution. The goal is to come up with something that's safe to try. Or when you're making a decision, distinguishing between a reversible and an irreversible decision, that can also be incredibly helpful to manage the risk, because a lot of things you can try and change, or you can get started and you can learn and you can get feedback. Again, not waterfall, big reveal, but agile, small bits, learning along the way. And of course, there is pilot purgatory, right? Where you try a lot of things, maybe too many things, and you don't scale them up. But I do think stepping back and thinking about examining, questioning your relationship to risk is a really healthy thing. And leadership has a really important role to play, because a lot of times, and I've been in this situation myself, you come into a room and you think your job is actually to stop things, to manage risk. And oftentimes the CFO is the party of no, right? But if you change your orientation and you think, and you come into the room and you say, what can I greenlight? What can I say yes to? It might not be the whole thing. It might be part of the thing. It might be something adjacent to the thing. That can also be really helpful, because then you leave the room with something moving forward. Again, maybe it's not the whole thing, but it's something. And that progress is what drives people. I think Teresa Amabile at Harvard Business School has done all this, the progress principle, all this great research about that's what really motivates people, is a sense that you're actually making progress, you're making an impact, things are moving forward. So if you think about not perfect, but safe to try, if you think about what can I move forward, however so small, and you think about and examine your relationship to risk, I think then you can actually make the car that runs on compost, not just talk about the car that runs on compost. By the way, if you all have done that, hats off to you.
I think there's also that the question is not just what can I move forward, but when can I move forward? Because we slow ourselves down with a lot of worry, fret, indecision. You have sections in the end of the book where there's the really practical guides, that the idea that we would form 10 ad hoc committees to be committees to discuss the committee that will. And so I think that's part of that culture around risk that keeps us safe, that we don't move, because it's not just what risk will we accept, it's when are we willing to take on the leap. Some of it is a leap of faith. You quote Nitso Sinai, Hack Your Bureaucracy, near the end of the book, and they're talking really about how do you grapple with the idea that the structure and the organization that we exist in is designed for stability and not agility. And I think that one of the bedeviling things for me, I've spent decades in higher ed, is that we're always grounded in tradition and looking to the traditional excellence of what defines higher ed. And again, when I was liberated out into a world of designing new models of higher ed and really thinking about what does the future need in developing economies, I was able to step away from that a little bit. But I do think that American reform and change in American higher ed is really just always toggling between this stability, tradition, and innovation. And I think that's where some of the aversion to risk sits.
Yeah, I think among those 678 references, there are lots of great resources to dive more deeply. Hack Your Bureaucracy is a great one, written by people who figured out how to get things done in the federal government in the Obama and Biden administrations, I believe. And they've got lots of quite useful tactics. And I try and sprinkle tactics throughout the book. One is scenario planning, which is just a structured way of dealing with uncertainty, right? Where you think about the decisions you have to make, the uncertainties you face, and you create different futures to design for. And then one of the things that almost always falls out of that is you can ask yourself, what would we do in any of these futures? And that can be a way to move forward and not get stuck in the kind of paralysis of uncertainty. And there's lots of other tactics. No big reveals was another great one. If you're walking into the room wondering how like some big vote or decision is going to go, like reschedule, you should already know because you should have already talked to people individually. If you're weighing different options, don't call them option 1, option 2, option 3, give them a name, because that forces you to distill what is this thing actually about. And then that helps people understand what they're actually choosing from. When you're making a decision, ask for clarifying questions before you have people weigh in on which direction. There's another way decision-making and risk and transformation gets stymied is you go through these different options and they're probably called A, B, and C or 1, 2, 3 instead of having names. And before maybe everyone understands all 3 options, people start weighing in and saying, we could never do number 3, or I'm really in favor of number 1. But just pausing and getting people to ask clarifying questions and making sure everybody understands the potential solutions, making sure you've defined the problem and you have a shared definition of the problem before you jump to solutions. So I try and offer some practical ways to move forward. And it's not that we don't want to throw out all the tradition, but to help you pick your spots, I give you some tactics. And actually, one thing that's been on my mind, you all seem to have this tradition of innovation, as I understand it, of reinventing yourself to meet the moment. And what's your secret sauce? What do you attribute that to? And how are you going to keep making that sauce into the future?
It's such a great question because I think it's another of those moments that puts in front of our community the values that define us and the opportunity, each of us and alone and collectively, to reflect on those values. Because the ironic, uncomfortable, unsettling fact is that in a school that defines itself through innovation and redefines itself regularly, it's really hard and there is still a lot of resistance. And I came to the college 4 years ago and I was really excited about the language, the values. We're radically pragmatic. We're different by design. We're upside down. And those are things that can be like snappy marketing and they can show up on website and materials. And the fact is that you land here in an interview and you spend time on this campus and it is radically pragmatic, different by design, and upside down. This is a really quirky, innovative, creative community, and it's incredible. And yet we all fear risk and change and the challenge that comes with that. But if you actually, to your question, if you study, you take a look at the history of Champlain, the timeline shows the transition from small business, training stenography, 2-year college, 4-year degrees, introducing game, going from a single gender to co-ed, having sports, not having sports. It's all in front of us. It really, truly is who we are. One of the stories from a sort of like in a galaxy long time ago and far away, when I was a professor before I was a provost, I did field work, ethnographic work in New York, and I was studying middle-class Black professionals who were gentrifying brownstones in Harlem. And there are these beautiful 19th century brownstones in stretches of upper Manhattan, and they had fallen into disrepair through urban renewal and white flight and arson and slumlord, but there are these beautiful structures. And I've actually spent like over a decade studying this community and this community transition, but I spent years hanging out in these brownstone renovations with families who were gutting buildings and sometimes with kids and spouses living in houses where they were knocking down walls and expanding rooms and making additions and pulling back old, beautiful architectural detail. And they were like the urban pioneers camping out in the shells of these houses because they had to carry on with their lives. What constitutes living in a house like this? Feeding yourself, bathing, sleeping, but also keeping your relationships and your family comfortable and functioning in its daily routine. And I hung out and sat in gardens and ate little sterno cook stove meals with people. And I just thought, oh my God, and there's like scaffolding and tarps and plastic and paint splatter all over the place. And I just thought, oh my God, I could never do this. I thought these people were brave and they were bold and they were scrappy and they had a vision about what they were doing with these houses and the neighborhood. But again, I just thought, oh my God, I could never do this. And then I moved overseas and again started building and designing and pulling apart university and college and classrooms and gutting and still having to teach and support students. And I thought, whoa, this is who I am. I think we are living in that kind of brownstone rehab, redesigning our house. And
As we live in it, yeah.
As we live in it. And I think that's where the tradition and the innovation sit. You're like blowing it up all around you and there's dust, but this does come back around to why I say we need to care for each other because we do have to eat and sleep and bathe and get through the day-to-day of our lives while we're redesigning the house. But this is a house that has always redesigned itself. It's really what the college is all about. So I think that you're right to pick up on that. It sits on our website. It sits in the archives. It's a part of our history, but thank you for bringing that up because I think it's a great reminder for us to grab onto that aspect of our values to keep walking through the connected college we are becoming.
And I think it's a wonderful analogy too, because families grow and change, right? Kids arrive, grandparents, whatever, my aunts, uncles, could go off to college, and houses change to accommodate that change and to support those families and friends. And in addition to the kind of functional chapters in the book, there's also some cross-cutting ones, the introduction, the conclusion, which I call commencement, and then one on breakthrough ideas. And one of the breakthrough ideas is change management, which I think is so important. That's how you get from good ideas to good implementation. And one thing I've certainly learned helping people change over the years, this is like my beyond kind of co-creation as a foundational principle. I think a close second is the idea that if you're trying to ask someone to give up something from the past, you have to give them something about the future to hold on to first, because otherwise it's very destabilizing. And that's actually how you can find some comfort with ambiguity and uncertainty, right? If you have the vision for what the house is going to be, then maybe you can deal with the renovation. But if you have no idea why a wall's getting knocked down or what's going to be there in the future, then it's pretty tough. So I think that having a really clear sense of what to hold on to so that you can maybe give up something else, I think is really, really important.
Thanks. This is fun.
Yeah.
I want to hear from our community, either online or in the room. The mics are set up.
We have a question online.
Hey, everybody. My question actually, I just really want to appreciate all the topics you brought up, especially regarding being agile. As someone who's come from game development and professional and academic background, I often find that one of the biggest struggles in academic organizations is building a more robust and transparent communication system. And I'm wondering if you could speak to either places that you've seen do that really well, or any tips or recommendations you have regarding building out better documentation, for example, and eliminating tribal knowledge pockets and silos and all that good stuff. And thank you very much for your insight today.
It's a great question. And I think it's really important because, again, how you get from good ideas to good implementation, communication plays a huge role in that. And it builds and sustains a culture and a community of practice. I think there's a few things that I've seen work. One is finding the right channel. I think we've all been in the meeting that could have been an email. We've also all received the email that should have been a phone call. So if you want to write the email, you write it and then just delete it and then go talk to the person. But I think being really mindful of the channel and the cadence, I think is really critical based on the audience, based on the messaging. I think understanding that getting comfortable repeating yourself, particularly among leadership, is incredibly important. This is something I struggled with personally as a creative entrepreneurial person. The idea that I would say the same thing the same way multiple times was crazy. But then I realized that was actually my job. And one of the things I do in the book is in the leadership chapter, I say, get comfortable repeating yourself, get comfortable repeating yourself, get comfortable repeating yourself. Because I think the repetition and the reinforcement is really critical rather than assuming that people are going to hear you and understand you the first time. They may totally miss the email or the message, the phone call, the idea the first 2 times they hear it. So I do think repetition and reinforcement is really critical. You'll hear me doing that a lot today. I'm saying something, then I'm saying it again because I don't assume that you're going to get it all the first time. I think the other communication tip I would offer or strategy really comes back to the design thinking ethos, which is create it together, co-create, and prototype. Because I think if you're creating it together, then you have to communicate less about it because everybody's been in or maybe not everybody, but the people that need to be are there from the beginning. And I think if you're prototyping something, that is a great way to improve the communication because you've made it more tangible, right? Like you may be imagining a new degree program and it's not until you maybe write a story about a day in the life or you create a storyboard or you try out that as a continuing ed class or as a certificate or something. So I think if you can prototype, if you can co-create, that also helps with communication.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm a big fan of storyboarding and journey mapping too. So thank you again.
Yeah. And in my own organization, that was one of the habits I tried to build. I would have people jump right to building a deck. And it was, hey, let's step back and actually, what story are we trying to tell? Let's make each slide a Post-it before you make the slide. And that way, thinking about fonts and grids and what image to use doesn't get in the way of actually thinking about what you're trying to communicate. And you can get feedback on the storyboard before you spend all the time making the final thing, which again is prototyping and co-creation. And design is in my DNA, so I'm sorry if I keep referencing it, but there you go.
Super helpful. Yeah. Good perspective.
I really appreciate the points that you made about communications. Very well said and well taken. My question for you is, you mentioned this idea of needing to help people let go. In order to help people let go of some of the things in the past, we need to show them a glimpse of the future. And I think that's an incredible concept that I want us to hold on to. Can you give us some ideas of things that you're really excited about for the future of higher education? Some things that you're seeing happening, new innovations, or things that we might be able to get excited about ourselves? Thanks.
Absolutely. I'm still learning about you all, but I think you're doing many of these things. But one thing I'm particularly excited about is ways for colleges and universities to blend study and support. Because I think in prior eras, those used to be separate, right? You go to the library to study, and then you go somewhere else for tutoring or writing or counseling. And I've been on a not so secret mission to transform libraries into student success hubs over the last couple decades. And it's a way to meet students where they are and to blend study and support and normalize getting help. Everybody goes to the writing center. Everybody goes to the tutoring center. Who doesn't want to learn like better study skills? Who doesn't want to better manage their time? Which, by the way, I talk about health and wellness in the book. I talked to the head of student health at UVA, and this was like this is one of the things that totally blew me away interviewing for the book. He was saying people hear mental health and they think more counseling, but it's actually also friends, community, time outside, time exercising, time with friends, listening to music. Almost all those things have time in the name of it. So one of the key unlocks for mental health is actually helping students better manage their time, and then they can take time outside. So I think blending study and support, I think is really exciting. And the other one I'll say, students working on real world projects in their classes as a form of experiential learning, I think is one of the most exciting developments, because you can develop a logo or a social campaign in your marketing class in the abstract or for a hypothetical organization. But if you go out in the community and work with a company, then you're meeting real people with real problems. You're building relationships as well as skills. Maybe that company needs an intern this summer. Maybe that CEO becomes a mentor. Maybe you meet your future self, right? And now all of a sudden you met the person in marketing that makes your stats class come alive. So those are two things: blending study and support and real world projects that connect colleges with companies and build skills and relationships.
I'm smiling and catching the eyes of various colleagues through much of what we're talking about and what you're saying there, because this is where we're moving. And I think the two examples that you gave about study and support, library, well-being, and experiential hands-on, I really want to just make sure that this is one of those connected college moments where we see, and our facilities team has been in this work with us to figure out how do we take the spaces as they were designed and the offices that were here and over there and had branding on them, and really keep moving in some of this relational support, different collegial relationships that we're developing.
As someone who started off as an architect, space plays a really critical role in both symbolizing and communicating, as well as advancing the strategy and supporting the strategies. I've been thinking about all the great things you're doing, and that just added a fifth C, right? Because you've got curriculum, you've got career orientation, you've got collaborative studios, and you've got company connections, and now you've got the campus. So I think those are your 5 Cs for transformation.
And our library as a space has also been conceptualized years ago in that move to the commons, the information commons, but they have been so incredibly welcoming in that space for more and more of our student support to move in. And our library is also a place where we do chili cook-off and photo competition and ways that we are bringing community together. So again, like calling out all of these different pieces of our campus, our ecosystem, the culture and the structure are shifting together. And so it's nice to hear you talking about some of that.
I work in student affairs. Something that I think we encounter frequently is to the outside community, to our students, to their people. I think they expect that we are much more connected internally than we really are. And I'm wondering any suggestions on how can we explain in a complex organization that we're striving to be more connected, and internally, how can we be more connected and more on the same page? Thank you.
It's a great question. And I think in terms of explaining and communicating complexity and at the same time striving for connection. I think there's a sort of a plan A and plan B to that, right? And plan A is be connected, and plan B is help people understand when some of those connections falter. And I think a lot about operating rhythm, and the kind of the rhythm and the rituals of any institution are in a way what define it. And they're also what help you go from an ad hoc or a one-off or somebody, one person knows one other person and these two things, and you're entirely dependent on the fact that those two people play pickleball together, that you understand student conduct issues. So it's not about like creating rigid processes or being entirely dependent on technology systems. I think a lot of it's about thinking about how you get in a rhythm. So for instance, what is the rhythm or the cadence by which you surface and share conduct issues so that faculty member that notices something knows how to raise their hand or use EAB navigate raise hand function or whatever it is. What are the channels, Slack, Teams, otherwise that you use that people know to check? So I think so much about it is like getting in a rhythm. Every month we do X, every week we do Y, every day we do Z. And those kind of rituals, getting in that rhythm, I think is how you build those connections, and you go from a one-off to something that's more internalized. And I think when you're still working on it and you don't have it figured out, I think the important thing is to offer the next best thing. If a student shows up at one office, classic, I can't register for classes, go to the registrar, turns out to be a tuition issue. But there is you need to go to student financial services response to that, or it's, I will take you there, or let's go to this room and we'll call student financial services together. The idea of the warm handoff, the warm transfer, as a good plan B. So if you haven't instrumentalized or internalized those connections, you can help students make them on the fly.
I think that what you just pointed out about the warm handoff is that the disconnect side of connected college is the experience for a student where they're working their way through a maze of bureaucracy, offices, people, and process. And it's really not inviting, and it does not foster inclusion, a sense of belonging, connection. And I think one of the things that we do try to keep our eye on, and we don't always get it right, is just how do we move away from some of that maze and that disconnect for students? Things are meaningful to us the way we've set them up, but not necessarily for the student experience or from their perspective.
Absolutely. And one other quick thought, because I know you have an awesome question to ask. One thing I learned, and we had a great podcast episode about this from the person who runs the Transfer and Returning Student Center at Portland State, our client. And one thing she said was, we can't expect students to know everything about our university, but we can expect them to know one person who can point them in the right direction. So I think the other plan B is making sure an advisor, a mentor, someone to turn to say, I'm having this problem or I see this opportunity, and that person can point them in the right direction. If every student has their person, that goes a pretty long way too.
Hi, I'm curious when you talk about design, like how DEI factors into that. It's particularly salient for me being a neurodivergent person. I have ADHD, and I am often hit with the reality that I'm living in a world that wasn't designed for me. Colleges weren't designed for me. And I think having diverse groups working on stuff really helps with that, because you get a lot of lived experiences and perspectives in the room to be like, actually, that doesn't work for everybody. But I'm curious what other things came up for you as you were doing this research.
I appreciate the question. Throughout the book, I talk about 4 key aspects of design thinking. And the first one is understanding people, because that's really the foundation. In some circles, design thinking has been rebranded human-centered design to double down on that idea that it's really about solving problems for people and with people as you mentioned. So I think the more you can do to understand who you're designing for, the better. And one of my favorite tools for any project, whether you're designing a new degree program or a new support service or a new organizational structure, is to create personas for the people you serve or support. And not personas that are defined by demographics, age, race. And in fact, there's an amazing illustration of this which I wish I could remember who came up with this because it's brilliant. It turns out King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne share many things in common. They're the same age. They're both divorced, both live in a castle. But if you were designing for King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne, you'd come up with like radically different solutions because their behaviors are different, their motivations are different. And that's really what you want to capture with personas, because they're like qualitative and quantitative portraits of different types of users, and whether they're companies you want to work with, students you want to support, staff you want to collaborate with, faculty, colleagues. So I think personas can be a great way to get DEI because it's a really concrete way of saying, here's who we're designing for, and we're not leaving a whole group of folks out. And then, as you said, when it's time to create things for those folks, they're at the table in whatever way is meaningful or possible.
Great thinking. I believe that we've arrived at time, and I'm going to wrap us up and just say thank you for seeing us and really getting to know the college, and for making time to just talk and listen.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the amazing work that you all are doing. I'm excited for the rest of today, and I hope this isn't the end of the conversation. So I invite you to follow me online. All the interviews I did on the book are actually also podcast episodes. So if you want to dive deeper, you could listen to all these great people I talked to riff for 30 minutes or so. So that's another way to learn more. And I'm really excited about your future, and I hope you are too. Thanks for listening to the Connected College podcast. Go to elliottfelix.com for more information about my book, The Connected College, articles I've written, and talks I've given. There's also tools you can download, information on upcoming events, and information on booking me to speak at your institution or organization. Please support the podcast by rating it and reviewing it wherever you're listening. Let's create connected colleges where all students succeed.